Hey everybody, this is Chris from Skeleton. Today's video is going to cover another progress update showing where we are on the path to Skeleton Next or Skeleton V3. I've released a couple videos previously. If you haven't seen those, I would definitely recommend going back and checking those out. You can find them currently listed on the Skeleton repo discussion section in this pinned post called Update 1. It may be in the list here if you're seeing this kind of later in the process. But in that post, I covered some of the early sort of concepts for the visual designs that we're looking towards, some of the code updates and things like that. So if you haven't seen those, definitely recommend checking those out. And then, moving forward to today, we have some exciting updates to show that have come about over the last couple of weeks since those videos were recorded. Just want to kind of go through those and show you really two main areas of focus today. One is going to be the new documentation site, which is currently in progress. You're kind of looking at it right now. And then also some progress that's been made on the Tailwind plugin. So I may split these up into two videos, but lots to cover here, so we'll just kind of dive right into it. First thing you're going to notice is obviously a very visual, strikingly different visual design here for the new doc site. This is a work in progress. This doesn't represent the final what it's going to look like in the final version, but wanting to give you some visuals to instead of just proposals and concepts and high level ideas of what things are going to look like. I just wanted to show you some concrete examples. If you go to the homepage of the new doc site, you're going to notice it's very bare bones, very minimal. And again, just wanted to make it clear that this is very early in the process. But as we've mentioned in the proposals and other update videos, the goal with the new doc site is actually to build it with this tool called Astro. If you're not familiar with Astro, you can see astro.build to view their website and see what they're all about. But a couple, really nice, they have a really nice little section here that I just want to talk through. Highlights the benefits and the reasons we're using this for the next version of Skeleton. So, island architecture. This just means that all of your portions of the page, the components or what have you, are treated as islands, separate islands, and you can hydrate those independently, which means apply JavaScript and logic like that. By default, they kind of put it here, 0JS by default. It just means that when you load your pages and you serve those pages, none of the scripting or logic or anything like that runs within those components. So they're just HTML, CSS, visual sort of thing. And then you can selectively choose which of those should be loaded and when. So when the page loads, when the component becomes visible on the page, that kind of thing. The main reason we're really going for it is that it supports a variety of different UI libraries, so everything from React to Svelte to Solid and so on that's listed here. This makes it really easy for us to be able to showcase our Svelte components running right in parallel with the React components in parallel with Vue or whatever comes next. So really, really nice feature there. Everything is server first, which means that server-side rendering is the kind of default or the focus, which means that a lot of this stuff should just load very quickly. If you go to the dock, it shouldn't be rendering all of that and doing all that work client side. It should be offloading that for you. SvelteKit and some of these other tools do a lot of that too, but Astro takes this kind of to the extreme, So it's a really cool way to do that. You also see support for Tailwind and MDX, which is Markdown, listed right here. A couple things that we are obviously using Tailwind quite a bit with Skeleton, and then Markdown is something that we're investigating for our docs just to make it a little easier for contributors and everybody else to kind of contribute and help with the pages and the content. So just wanted to cover that real quick just so you have a frame of reference of what Astro is and why we've kind of chosen to use that. But going into the doc site itself, you can see we have a very simple navigation, very simple layout. There will be like a table of contents section that appears for each section, very similar to our current site or any other kind of documentation site you're familiar with. That's just not built yet, so you'll see a gap over here for that. But you can see a lot of the sections kind of starting to come together. We've got typography, some new sections that aren't present in the V2 docs, some things that are familiar, such as some of the features and things like that we're going to talk about today. Some sections that are just sort of stubbed out. Some of the components that we're looking to build, those aren't quite built yet, but we're kind of providing a space for those. And then even this new section called Cookbook, which again, I'll like to kind of get into in just a moment, just to explain what the heck that is. So the first thing, again, I want to point out is the flatter navigation. If you kind of compare that to the V2 docs, we have this very like chapter or sectioned, kind of docs that had lots and lots of content within each of these little top level sections here. And what we've done is essentially try to flatten that to a single list. And so you're going to see not everything that's present in all these is currently ported over, but we're kind of starting to step out of place for that. So it'll be much more like the Vite documentation, or some other documentation site you may be familiar with, where a lot of that is just very quick and easy to access. We'll still have search and things like that if you really need to kind of dig in, but again, just want to kind of show the navigation piece first. The sections we're kind of highlighting here, we have a doc section, which is going to be stuff like, what is Skeleton? How do I install it? Those kind of very high level sections that just kind of get you up and off the ground. We're introducing this new design system section, which is going to cover a lot of the sort of core principles. We kind of called this the essentials section in the previous version of the V2 docs. So you're going to see kind of an expansion to that and a little bit more in-depth coverage for some of these features here. We also have this tailwind section, which represents very similar to here. A lot of the sections you see, like badges and alerts and those kind of things. Kind of a place for those things to live. We can click in here and see the badges, buttons, etc. All those kind of exist. In the previous version of the docs, in the V2 docs, we had this Svelte specific section, which of course had the accordion and app shell and all these components that you may be familiar with. Those will continue to be ported forward and exist here, but we do have kind of a dilemma we have to deal with, which is when we start introducing React and other components systems in the future, we need to support those. So what we're planning to do is have something like you go to the accordion section and we have either a selection somewhere on the page or maybe big tabs at the top that let you quickly toggle between which version of the components and the docs that you want to see. So if I want to see the accordion documentation for Svelte, or if I want to see the accordion documentation for React, we'll have all of that just at a quick toggle or a quick way to swap between those. We're also going to look to persist that option so that you aren't having to constantly shift between that. If you're working on a React project, you don't have to keep selecting React or something like that. It'll persist that, and it'll understand what your preference is there. But a nice comparison to be able to jump between those as well. Down here a little further, we have the cookbook section, which is going to take the place of what we used to call this tailwind blocks. And so you can see kind of some of these sections here, like the chat UI, gradient headings, things like that. A lot of these are features that were built using either Tailwind or Skeleton primitives, so utility classes provided by either side. But not necessarily like a dedicated component or something custom to Skeleton. It's just how do you use the parts that we're providing to build something greater. And so we're going to continue that tradition, maybe breaking this out into some sort of categories to just make it a little easier to understand. Hey, this is a simple feature to implement, or whereas like chat is a little bit more difficult because there's more pieces to that, right? More parts to kind of implement and set up. So you can see we've already got a few of these things set up. You're going to notice a couple very familiar sections. So in previous versions of Skeleton, we had dedicated Tailwind components, as they're called, for these three features at the top. As part of V3, we've kind of reviewed and decided, hey, like a lot of these can be built with the primitives that we provide. So we're going to look to just provide you kind of the instructions on how to do that. And you notice right now it's just showing previews of these. It's not showing the code snippets or examples of how those are actually implemented. I can show you some of that maybe here in a moment, but no, that's coming. That's part of the continued evolution of the docs. Right now, we're just testing to make sure it looks the way we want it to. And so right now the page is serving purely as a presentation for the rendered elements and things like that. But you can see a lot of those features will continue to exist. We will continue to provide ways to set those up. Just the way those are implemented in Skeleton or in your project is going to differ a little in V3. So just a heads up there. To quickly kind of browse through a couple of these sections here, we do have the color section, which is covering a lot of new information. The next video that I'm going to go into is going to cover more about the plugin, how these colors are being generated, how they're working with your theme, what's new, how it's being expanded. But just real quick, I just wanted to show kind of what the new expanded color palette looks like. Some of the new contrasting tones are kind of shown off here, and then how we're kind of visualizing some of the new the color pairing system, which we had in V2, but was very confusing for folks. It didn't quite click on how some of these things worked. We had a section here that we kind of visualized and showed, excuse me, the pairings here, but it wasn't always kind of clear of like, okay, what, I get the concept, but how do I do, work with that? How do I do that? And so the other cool thing is you see that the pairings now support a much, much larger amount of Tailwind options. So in the previous version, you could do color pairings for, say, background colors, where you would have your 50% or your shade 50 and your kind of either ends of the spectrum here, 50, 950. You could pair those, and we had that for background, we had it for text and a couple other properties, but we didn't have all of these. I think there was 4 previously, and now there's, I don't know, 10 or so there. The other cool thing we're showing is kind of showing what the actual pairings are, because the numbers have changed as this 950 shade is brand new. It's an expansion to our palette, and matching what Tailwind is providing for that now. And then I also want to show you kind of towards the bottom, if we toggle, this is the light mode here. We do have support for that currently in the docs. You can kind of see this actually visualized of what's happening. So as I toggle between the light and dark modes, you're going to see those colors at the very bottom shift and jump between the 2 paired colors. And so that kind of helps visualize, like, how is this background color going from this black color to the white color, and how does it know to do that? And that's because it's using a pairing between Surface 50 and Surface 950, and those are jumping and toggling back and forth. So just to kind of help give you a visual aid for some of that. Typography section is going to be very similar to the previous version. A lot of this, I do have some code snippets to showcase some of this stuff here. It's going to look very familiar. The syntax is exactly what you'd expect. Some of the visual design is a little different as part of what we discussed in the previous videos with design updates and things like that. Please note that this is just a test theme. There's not multiple themes set up yet. We do not have multiple themes in the new theme format, so unfortunately I can't toggle between those and show you kind of the variety and the extensibility of the themes. But just know, like, at least for the test theme that we're running here, this is what it looks like when you display these different things. And so some of the colors are a little different, some of the visualization is a little different, but for the most part it should be familiar. The one kind of major addition to this list is the addition of lists. Which is obviously a huge portion of any kind of typography system. We're really kind of taking a very light stance with lists as far as V3. In the previous versions of Skeleton, what we did was we had Tailwind lists. So we had these like really like opinionated styled lists that had, that wasn't it always kind of what folks were looking for of, hey, I want a bullet list, or I want to, an ordered list, or I want to ordered list with numbers or something like that. They were very difficult. They had lots of, you had to, put additional markup and stuff in. And so we're just kind of taking a step back. We're just mostly providing these using the Tailwind primitives for list styling and things like that, and just making sure that those work within the theme system and the colors and that sort of thing. And then we may expand this a little bit further with components and things like that, or Tailwind components that provide a little bit more structure if you're building something like a navigation list, but we at least have some of the basics in place for that. So just know that that's kind of in progress. Spacing, I will come back to as part of the Tailwind plugin update. Some really cool stuff here to show. Definitely want to check that out. It's one of the coolest new features that we have. Presets, this is going to be sort of the equivalent to what we had in V2, which was called variants. So you may be familiar with setting up a button or a card and then using like a variant style for like the filled primary to get something like this. We're kind of taking that to the extreme in V3, where we now have essentially every shade, every pairing that you could really want with the skeleton system. So in the previous version, we would define primary, but it would only use primary 500, that middle shade of your color palette, right? And that was it. There was no color paired versions of the filled state or anything like that. In V3, you'll see now there is. It goes all the way from here down to here. You can see the kind of gradient spread or ramp for that. And then we're including a neutral style. And so if I toggle between that, you can see the neutral style just kind of defaults into surface or a very neutral color, just to make sure that it's not part of primary, it's not part of anything like that. It's just, hey, I just want a kind of a very neutral type button or card or what have you. And you can see a lot of this stuff is balanced really well with that. There's also some new styles, such as the tonal style. We had ringed, I think is what it was called previously. It is now called outlined. But a lot of it's the same thing. The other change, obviously, is the word variant is now replaced with preset. We had some talks about this internally and just decided that this is easier to write. It's less, characters, which is nice, and more semantically describes what the heck these things are, because there's the obvious fact that if you are familiar with the inner workings of Tailwind, that they have this concept of variant sort of outlined inside of Tailwind itself. So if you are doing the directive layers, you have things like base styles, component styles, utility classes, and then variants. And so variants have a very different meaning in Tailwind itself than what we were, dubbing those features that we were building for Skeleton. So as part of kind of V3, you're going to see us kind of adopting, going a little further into what Tailwind provides as far as the plugins and things like that, but also kind of reevaluating some of our naming to just make it more semantic, make it more on the nose and more descriptive of what it's actually supposed to do. And so presets, I think most people will kind of pick that up right away, just understand, and it'll be very intuitive. Personally, I've been writing a lot of the the V3 style stuff with this. I really like the shorter name. It's much it's much nicer. We're still kind of evaluating gradients and some of the other kind of styles, variants that we had for V2. So if you see like the glass style and gradient style, those are not on here yet, but we're still kind of considering how we want to handle this in V3. They may come forward, they may not. We may just lean into what Tailwind provides. TBD kind of thing. Going further here, we have, of course, various different Tailwind components. And so these are the features that are built with, I don't have, let me see, I'm going to switch over here and show you this real quick, which is Tailwind's badges. So here's the actual code that's powering the page that you're looking at there. So you can see we're using that same exact kind of syntax if you've created a badge or a button or something like that in Skeleton V2, where you just append a set of utility classes. There's a badge class, and then instead of a variant class, the new preset class, where you get very specific about what style you want. And then this is the kind of output that you get. So the same concept from V2, just coming straight over with the addition of the new preset naming for that. And we're just showing a few examples here. Again, we'll see code blocks and be able to quickly toggle between this and things like that in the new docs. That's just not there yet. But I did want to kind of showcase just kind of what some of the new visual styling looks like, the new smaller, kind of nicer looking buttons. We do still have a variety of sizes for buttons. We still have a disabled state for buttons. And we still have the concept of a button group. The styling is obviously a little different from our previous iteration. If I pull up buttons here, like we had, this is kind of what the button groups looked like in the old version. So just again, another kind of opinionated change. The cool thing with this is just using a combination of variants or presets as they're now called. And so if I go to buttons here, switch to buttons, excuse me. You can see it's very simple for how this button group is created. We're using the button group class just like you would expect. We're adding a preset there that adds that outline style, and then we're using some flexbox styling to just control breakpoints for where it switches to a vertical column as opposed to a row. And then buttons are just kind of dropped in here. And then you can even use those presets and hover styles using additional preset settings as well, just to kind of control the different states. So you can see this is what the hover state looks like. It's using a tonal kind of neutral tone. This is using the neutral fill tone, and then it's an outline preset that's surrounding all that. So just a handful of these same concepts over and over and over. You can build some really complex UI, which is pretty cool. So much more control for you, the user, to be able to do all kinds of cool stuff with these primitives that we're providing you. Cards should be very similar or very familiar from V2. Obviously, light and dark mode is supported for all of these features. Chips, very similar to before. These are for things like selection. So we have a little example of selection state down here. Dividers are your horizontal rules, or in this case, vertical rules if you so choose. We're just showcasing some of the syntax between those and the different weights that you can choose between those. Using very familiar Tailwind syntax for controlling the weight with the border. Forms and inputs, again, very similar to what we had in the V2 version. Some of the design aesthetics are changing there. Obviously, we have this nice blue as our primary tone. Checkboxes, some of these like special kind of inputs, such as a file picker, and then we even have the new groups. And so again, similar to the button groups, we've kind of revisited how we're handling the form groups. And so we have again a much simpler syntax for how we're actually setting those up. So if you've used our input groups in the past, this will look familiar, but you'll also see some new stuff like the use of the Tailwind divide feature for adding lines between each cell or each item within. So very similar to what you may have seen in the past, but some nice quality of life improvements should hopefully help work around some bugs and things like that existed in the previous iteration. Placeholders, or skeleton UI as it's sometimes called. We obviously changed the name to avoid conflict with our branding here. So the new table styles, which I'm personally very proud of. This is drawing from some of a variety of sources that have gone to this new very minimalistic slim kind of style, compared to the big chunky styles that we had in Skeleton V2, which again, these have a purpose. These work really well. You will still be able to replicate something like this in V3 with some of the themes and styling primitives that we're providing. It's just by default we're going with a little bit kind of a slimmer kind of design for that. Just honestly looks really sleek, looks really nice. Accordions, I mentioned, is just mostly a placeholder for the components as we start porting those things forward. I'll talk about that a little bit more in probably the end of the next video. And then finally we have the cookbook section, which is, again, just a catch-all for anything that's built using skeleton and Tailwind primitives with maybe a little bit of rudimentary JavaScript or logic kind of added to that. These will not necessarily be framework specific. They will be framework agnostic, but it's just showing you kind of, the concepts of how do I build some of these things using skeleton. And just, while a lot of these you can see we're putting by Skeleton Labs, by, the skeleton team itself, we are going to look to encourage folks to actively contribute some of these ideas as well. So if you build a really cool component or feature using these primitives that we provide, maybe come and create a little documentation section that just shows, hey, here's how you build that, and we'll gladly give you credit and maybe link off to your GitHub account or something like that. So still working out the details. This may also be the place where we house integrations, or we may have a similar section next to the cookbook for integrations. So if you're wanting to do something like in V2, where you can come in here and see how do I integrate with Tori, we'll have kind of a dedicated place for talking through some of that. So whether it's here or a new section, I'm not quite sure yet. So that's the docs. I'll go ahead and wrap this video. And then again, we're going to follow up very shortly, or probably by the time you see this in the same post, with the second video that's going to cover how we're doing a lot of the things you just saw behind the scenes. So a lot of this, or well, really almost all of this, is powered by the new theme format and the new Tailwind plugin, both of which have been dramatically overhauled and updated. And so that'll be the focus of the next video. So if you're curious about some of the inner workings of that and just to kind of see what's coming down the road with that, definitely check that out. So thank you guys.